going to get started, and then hopefully everybody else that's due to join us will, of course, jump on. So good morning to those of you that are there. And for those of you that are new, remember, I can't see you, but I can hear you. And this is absolutely meant to be your program. So this is supposed to be interactive. So as we start to move through the program, please note at any point in time you have a question, absolutely go ahead and unmute yourself, even if it's not a question or you have a comment. So we like this to be engaging. We definitely like to have feedback. And also because that not only helps us to kind of take the course for the program, because for today, we are doing another farm focus on sheep. So of course, I'm out here in the sheep pen, and I did, of course, bait the children with a little bit of extra breakfast in order to keep them around. But for the most part, these guys are really pretty interactive with us anyway. So I think even as they finish their hay, they are still going to be inclined to kind of hang out. But of course, this just keeps them centered a little bit more for some of our discussions. And so I say this as an introduction to our sheep as our farm focused topic. And that's because there's always so much to be able to talk about, so much to be able to cover. So as we're in the beginning of these Tuesday with Tabbethia programs, many of them are going to be an introduction, and then we can certainly dive deeper into certain aspects of the different animals on the farm based on people's interests or based on what's going on the farm. So even as I thought about things this morning, as we're beginning to prep for the winter, there are definitely some programs where we're going to be able to do some weight taking, some hoof trimming, even some injections for some deworming. So these are different things that we always want to try to take what's actually going on the farm and then apply it to the program so that you not only have a chance to learn, but also have a little bit of an inside look onto what a day in the life around here is like. So again, with sheep, there can be so many different things that we can talk about. So I definitely will welcome these questions as we move along. I, of course, have an outline in my head, but the best part about these programs is, for me, they're not scripted. And so that means I can take your interest, your questions, and then we can kind of mold it around in the next hour. So again, thank you so much for taking a little time to join us here this morning. I know we've got some new people on with us, and as always, part of my idea about this program is to create community. So for those of you that have become regulars and have been joining us week to week, it's even fun to see those of you interacting with each other, getting to know each other. And we all come to this program with a little bit of a different interest. So over the weeks, we have, of course, plenty of our fiber enthusiasts, whether you're a knitter, crocheter, weaver, spinner, being able to know a little bit more about these animals of which the natural fibers you perhaps are working with is really our main interest and our goal for education. I know over the course of the weeks, we've had some people. Are you giving us a butt shot, Mumford? Over the course of the weeks, we've had some people, and I think Claudia is supposed to be joining us this morning, who have actually owned sheep or other types of livestock. And then I'm also really excited is that one of the main reasons why I wanted to be able to also do this program is to be able to cater to the educational aspect of it. So we've got Jennifer and hopefully her family and her kids that are being homeschooled as well joining us. And don't forget, with this crazy COVID time, there are plenty of school children that are hybrid or now newly schooling from home. Hey, Cusco. He's like, why isn't this program about me today? Yeah, we're gonna have to have on our only alpaca. So Cusco's over here kind of checking out. He's like, hey, they're getting a little extra breakfast. How come I'm not getting some of that? So that's always the fun thing about the program, is just kind of taking a little bit of what these animals give us. Now, Miss Lily here, this is a big treat for you because you don't normally get hay, and now you're just wearing all of it. So let's start by just doing an introduction, of course, to the sheep that we have here on our farm. Now, for what we do here at Long Island Yarn and Farm, my main goal, of course, is putting a face with the fiber. That's our mission statement. So giving people a better understanding about where all your natural fibers come from. And by doing that, giving you a chance to meet those that call life their home. Now, with our sheep, we don't breed them. So difference from our llamas, of course, where we have a pretty extensive breeding program, and we're looking at different things about why we have the various llamas that we keep on our farm. With the sheep, my main goal has always been to have a little bit of diversity of breed, a little bit of diversity of color, which right now we only have one that's naturally colored, and most importantly, personality. Because one of the things about sheep, as much as we love them, they can be a bit sheepish. And so they have more of a flight instinct. And it's not generally the nature of sheep to want to be able to come up and interact with you, even if they know you. It really just depends on how they're raised and how they're handled. So for me, each of the sheep that we've chosen to add to our program here over the years has really solely been based on their personality, so that I can ensure that we have animals that people can easily interact with when they come here to the farm. Because what better way to be able to get your hands in this wool, to be able to get a hug or a kiss from a sheep, to be able to get to know them just a little bit better. So we'll start with our matriarch here. This is Miss Lily, right, Lil? Lily is our only naturally colored sheep. So I think for a general rule, people, of course, are familiar with the fact that sheep are white. That's sort of the quintessential picture that we think about. And one of the unique characteristics, of course, about having fleece that's white means we can dye it. So, of course, that's a whole nother chapter. But I think that that's why a lot of people will look to source out that white fleece, because for those of us maybe that like bright colors or different colors opposed to a natural palette, you want that white fleece as a natural base to be able to work with. But with sheep, are you raising your hand? Yeah. Oh, okay. No, absolutely. So also too, guys, Karen is behind the camera and she can see the chat room for me. So if anybody has any questions and you're not comfortable with wanting to interrupt me, which I don't mind, then definitely put it in the chat room. And then I'll just ask Karen to just read them out loud. I didn't really quite know what she was doing with her hands up. So she was being a good school kid. So, all right, with regards to breeds, and then yes, that's what we're moving through. So Lily is a naturally colored Cotswold. So that's Cotswold. Also Mumford, who has placed his big butt and is now moving away, is also a Cotswold. And then last but not least, we have our youngest here, Clover, who is also a Cotswold. And then the other two, we've got Jack here, and then we've got Jill. So that might tell you they are twins. They are called Romneys. So right now we really only just have the two breeds to be able to show you and teach you about. However, they are both very different. And so that was my main reason also for having different breeds that can be shorn at different times and also have different wool characteristics. So again, going back to Miss Lily, so the beauty to me of a naturally colored fleece is that you can really appreciate the various shades that the colors can be aside from just white. So Lily here, of course, has got a lot of black points, but she's just a really gorgeous gray color, as hopefully you can see in the camera, right? Beautiful. Also, different breeds can come in a variety of different colors. So it's really kind of breed specific, meaning not every breed is going to offer you a lot of different colors. There are some breeds that are solely identified by their color. So what one is coming to mind for me is a breed called a Tunis, Tunis. They have a gorgeous fleece and they're more of a cream color with red face and red legs. So just like where you see Lily's black points on a Tunis, they would be red or orange, if you will. So that's just some examples of the different things that you can find with sheep, meaning the variety of colors that might be within a breed. And then also on the other hand, some breeds that are just specifically one color, and that's how they are identified. Now, one of my goals for today's program is really just to kind of highlight the various reasons why one might have sheep, what they can be used for. And again, it's all about this is your program. So we can certainly create diversification within all of those areas. But essentially, when we look at sheep and we think about why somebody might raise sheep, well, first and foremost, of course, they can make a great pet, as you can see here by all of ours. But then there are different things that we think about and maybe some things that we don't think about in terms of where we would or what we would use from sheep. It's so hard to concentrate with a lily in my face. So I do need to finish, of course, all of the actual name introductions because that's the most fun. So as I said again, this is Lily. And now I'm going to get these guys back over here because they're trying to find every little bit of pieces that they can find. So unfortunately, you're only going to get butt shots. That's not always the best. But this big guy here, this is Mumford. And Mumford is another Cotswold. You can see actually with these three butts right in a row, a lot of size difference between these guys. So Mumford, I would say, is a bit of a larger Cotswold, which is fine. He's both larger, tall, and also larger, a bit wider. So we always have that, right? Somebody's always a little bigger than they should be, and maybe somebody's always a little skinnier than they should be. Plan fail, and now we've got chickens joining us. And then on the other hand, the unique characteristic about little baby Clover, who's here underneath the feeder because she's tiny enough to get under there. So Clover was actually a triplet. So when we look at lambs being born, generally they're born in the spring, and it might not be common to you to know that definitely having multiples in a birthing is really something that you look for. So I think ideally, if you were involved in sheep as a business, whether it's fiber farming or meat farming or dairy farming, you definitely want to maximize the amount of babies that you might get from any one animal. Twins is usually a good number because sheep have two teats. So if you've got two kids and you've got two teats to be able to feed them, it's the perfect combination. Not that there's anything wrong with having one, but you want to think about maximizing your output for these guys. Now, when you start to move towards multiples past that, so interestingly enough to me, maybe to some of you, there are certain breeds that will actually give you 3, 4, and even 5 lambs, which ideally they are not really set up for because again, they only have 2 feeding stations. Go ahead with the question. Oh, okay, good question. So for our sheep, because I did mention at the top of the program, we are not breeding our sheep. Our sheep are solely here for education. They are truly just our pets. We're not even totally concerned about breed standard, meaning making sure they're the epitome of the representation of their breed. So Mumford, as well as Jack, who is right behind me here, these guys are both castrated. So in the livestock world, we don't refer to it as neutered. We say that they are castrated. And a castrated male sheep is called a wether. So like the weather, but spelled differently, W-E-T-H-E-R. On the other hand, while we're looking at terminology and vocabulary, a female sheep is called a ewe, that is E-W-E. And then of course, a baby is a lamb. And if the animal was intact or used for breeding, then yes, they would be referred to as a ram. Now, one of the interesting things about being called a ram is because that's what they do. And so rams do not really make great pets. They can really be very sweet and easy to handle when you're on the other side of the fence. But in particular, during breeding season, they are definitely going to be a bit more assertive, and ramming is what they like to do. So you definitely have to watch yourself with that. It can be very dangerous, mainly because they are right at kneecap height. So you do have to be super careful about that. And any intact male animal, for the most part, those are certain things that you have to watch. So like with all animals, our dogs and cats in particular, meaning always spaying and neutering, castrating is always going to make for a better pet. And now sticking on that topic, so you might not have thought about it, but in livestock, the females, we do not spay female animals. And that's because one, it's pretty cost prohibitive, meaning it would be too expensive to do that. And there's really no reason to do that either. As long as we take care of the males or keeping males segregated, the females essentially are fine just the way they are. So that's a pretty common practice, is to not spay any female livestock. So again, please keep coming with these questions, guys, because it certainly will take us in lots of different directions. And hopefully it might not seem too scattered for you, but there's always a wealth of information to cover. And that's why we can continue to dive into some of these barn focuses. Now, one of the other things that I'm thinking about as it comes to the top of my head, and we were talking about gender and the terminologies for gender, a lot of people will see horns and will think that horns are specific to a male animal. And that's not necessarily the case at all. So with my sheep, none of these sheep have horns. So if an animal is born without horns, it's referred to as polled, P-O-L-L-E-D. That means they are genetically born without horns. Now, the reason why that's even a terminology is because there are some breeds of sheep that do have horns. And even within a breed, another one that's coming to mind is there's a breed called a Dorset. And there are some Dorsets that are polled. And then there are some Dorsets that have horns. So there's horned Dorsets and polled Dorsets. And so again, whether they're males or females, they will also have horns, but there would be a difference in size on these horns. So that's just something else to keep in mind. Not that we're talking about goats. Yep, go ahead, jump in.
Tabbethia, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no,
my
don't
7-year-old
apologize.
Sebastian has a non sequitur question here for you. He wants to ask about the sheep.
Go for it. Absolutely.
Here, start again. Go ahead.
How long does it take to shear a sheep?
Oh, wonderful question. So as far as how long it takes to shear a sheep, now, mind you, I can't remember the world record, but there are people that literally can shear a sheep in about a minute. Now, that's also going to be different breeds are going to take longer. I would say on average, it could be anywhere from about 3 to 5 minutes. Generally speaking, when I'm shearing, I'm not in a rush. And so I do take my time, and it might feel like an eternity, but it's still definitely under 10 minutes. So
Wow,
that's a great question.
I thought it would be like 20 minutes. How about you, Sebastian?
Oh,
yeah. I didn't know it was that fast.
Well, so one of the great things, hopefully, Jennifer, is kind of if you stick with us in the future, now we really just exited shearing season. And actually, there are some people that are still shearing right now. There are certain breeds of sheep that are shorn twice a year. And so Lily here, our Cotswolds, Mumford, and Clover, if you look at them next to Jack here, you'll see a difference in the length of their fleece. So there are certain sheep that fall into what we call the long wool breed category. So sheep are divided into different categories. There's fine wool, there's medium wool, there's long wool, and then there are downs. And the downs are generally associated with the breeds that are raised more for meat than anything else. And so in the long wool breed category, when you look at these guys, their fiber right now, their wool is very short. And yet on the other hand here with Jack, you can really see, even when I'm sticking my hand in, you can see him getting lost. And so that's because I choose not to shear my Romneys twice a year because I'm looking for what we call a longer staple. So Jennifer, we were just talking about that.
I didn't realize it had to do with the shearing. Okay.
It can do with the shearing, but it also can do with the breed. So just to, again, that's what this program is about, guys. And so for all my fiber people, so Jennifer and I were actually talking last night with regards to spinning. And so when somebody is a spinner, you are going to notice more than being a knitter that fibers have different lengths. And the reason why that's important is because when you are spinning and making your own yarn, somebody like a merino or a rambouillet, the fine wool breeds of sheep, interestingly enough, have a very short staple. It's maybe only about 1.5 inches long. So when you're a spinner, that means your hands are going to be moving a lot more because that staple length is shorter. As opposed to long wool breeds, it's exactly what it sounds like. Their fleeces tend to be a lot longer, yet they're coarser. So I'd have to say I don't know 100% for sure, but I do think for the most part that the shorter staple is usually conducive of a finer fleece, the longer staple, a bit of a coarser fleece. But when you've got that longer staple, you can really feel your hands getting farther apart because the individual pieces of fibers are longer. As a knitter, all of that together, and then we've got that twisted, So it's holding it together and giving it its strength. So it's not really apparent to us as a knitter. So that's a little bit about, that staple length. And in one hand, these Romneys right here, these guys, oh, they're so wet, that I choose not to shear twice a year. And then these guys, on the other hand, I do. They are naturally going to be shorn in the spring and in the fall. So unfortunately, we don't have the comparison to be able to show you, but these guys will grow the same amount of fleece in about a 6-month time as any other breed would grow in a year's time.
Oh,
So
wow.
if we were to leave the fleece on a sheep, or next time we do, Copy is in the background there. She's like, I want it to be a goat program. But in the background, we've got our Angora goats, and Angora goats are also shorn twice a year. So a lot of people will ask, well, why are we shearing them twice a year? So it is because the length of fleece, we want to be able to harvest that for ourselves, but also for them. Imagine not ever brushing your hair for that length of time. And then for those of you, so here's a segue into our felting program tonight. For those of you that think about what is felting, and you are perhaps getting involved in felting your own soaps this holiday season, felting is taking a natural fiber, hot and cold water, okay, fluctuation in temperature, and agitation, the rubbing. So sheep can basically felt themselves because we always have a lot of fluctuation in temperature, especially in these fall winter months, more so than we're going to experience in the summer, late spring, summer. And agitation. Jack, do you like to rub on the fence all the time? Yes, you do. So right now we've got a wet sheep, and then they start to get itchy when they've got that wool growing on them. And so they are going to rub on the fence, and that is going to create that agitation. And felt on a sheep is not good, because once it's felted, you can't unfelt it. So that's another reason why we want to be able to get the fleece off of these guys, is so that they're comfortable and that they are not stuck with a matted fleece on them that can also cause skin problems or irritations, and definitely don't want them to be uncomfortable in any way that way. So that's, again, just a little bit about the shearing twice a year. Now, they are livestock. They are going to be able to adjust to the outdoor temperatures a lot easier than us. And again, as I always say around here, if we do happen to shear them a little bit later, and if they're a little chilly, we can always put a coat on them. So we definitely want to try and take care of our animals as best as we can. Miss Lily here is our matriarch. She is 11. So she is definitely a senior citizen, as is also Jack and Jill. They're just right behind her at 10 years old. So if we feel we have to make any accommodations for our older animals, we do. And then just a point in my mind, as they even get older, it might be where we don't want to shear them twice a year. And so we do have one of our Angora goats that does not get shorn in the fall, because we're less concerned about her fleece and more concerned about wanting to make sure that she's healthy and warm. We don't want her to expend any energy trying to keep warm. One of the things that I want you to also take note of is, of course, again, we can go in so many different directions, and thinking about the question that was asked with regards to shearing. So as a shearer and as a knitter, a fiber lover, and just being able to appreciate all these different animals, you're going to start to take notice of some of the things that we talk about. And so there are some sheep that have what we call a clean face and clean legs. Now, interestingly enough, I don't really seem to own any of them, and that makes shearing so much easier when I do not have to worry about shearing all of this fuzz off the faces. Now, of course, it makes for cute faces, but as a shearer, when I have to work around their eyes or their ears to be able to get all that fuzz off, or wanting to take it off of their legs, that's all going to take extra time. So those are things to think about in terms of that question about how much time it might take to shear a sheep. And this is totally unrelated, but when you Google perhaps shearing competitions and you see some of the times that they have, I mean, I literally think there's one that's like 25 seconds or something crazy like that. But they are also not having to work around those areas, and they also don't have to work around the genital areas. So the area around the hind end and the area around the teats are actually already taken care of ahead of time, because those are precarious areas that take a little bit more to work around. So just a little tidbit when you go to look at maybe perhaps some of those shearing record times. Yes, go ahead.
What do you like about the breeds you have, like White Cotswolds and the ones you have, that you
No, absolutely. And it was funny, you know, one of the things in my mind too about conversations to have and different things to talk about, you know, whether you are shopping for an animal, whether you're shopping for a spinning wheel, whether you're shopping for a car. I know that's a ridiculous analogy, but it's all the same. And you have to have your checklist about what's important to you. So for me, again, as I think I mentioned, one of the most important things was personality. And so looking at a more mild mannered breed, or just a breed that maybe sometimes it's just the animal and how they were raised. Like in the case of Jack and Jill, they actually happened to be bottle babies. And so they had a little more handleability, friendlier, if you will, as a result of that. I definitely wanted to be able to have some sheep that I could shear twice a year. Normally, without it being this lovely COVID time, we do a lot of public shearing demonstrations. Instead, this year we did it on Zoom. But having breeds in which I could shear in the spring, as well as shearing in the fall, allows me to do more educational programming because people love to see the shearing demonstration. So that was important to me. Normally, it's also important to me to be able to have a little bit of color diversification. I don't really have that right now. And also sometimes it's what is accessible to me. So right down the street, actually, the farm that I used to manage, they do breed and raise Cotswolds. So oftentimes I can handpick ones that are friendly based on their personality or something that I might like about them. So that's where the Cotswolds actually all come from, the Suffolk County farm. And I do try to pace or stagger my ages, because it is nice to have a variety of ages. And look, the reality also is that I do have to think about, as animals get older, making sure that I've got other animals coming up to be able to utilize for our educational programs, because our senior citizens, we definitely want to be kind to them and not make them work quite as much. The sun is out and it's drizzling. How bizarre is this weather this time of year? And so actually, for instance, Clover, who's now peeing on our program, because of course sheep just go when they need to go. I think that's the beauty of it. So in her case, she was a triplet, as I started to say before. She was getting supplemented by her mom, because again, sheep only have two teeth. So that means they can't always take care of all of their babies as well as we would like. And so we had met Clover on the day she was born, and we had additional interactions with her. And so I did specifically request, if they were looking to place her, that we would happily add her onto our program. And so that's been the most recent addition that we have here. So for me, those are the things that I look at. But it's a great segue. And just as I think that was Nicole that asked that question, just as you see, I can keep on rolling and I can keep on talking because there's so much information, and this is just sort of trying to touch the iceberg. So please don't ever hesitate to just hit that mute button, and when you do unmute yourself, I can hear it start to jiggle, and I know someone wants to ask something, and then I can just be quiet at that moment for you to ask. So don't hesitate to do that. But when you're looking at sheep, here are the things that we have to look at. Size, a weird thing, but that is something you want to look at, is size a consideration based on the area that you have to accommodate your animals, maybe based on animals that you want to handle. Sometimes people think small is better, but I will definitely caution that some of the smaller breeds, nothing against Shetlands and Icelandics. I don't know if Claudia jumped on the program, but that was a breed that they have always had, but they tend to be a little scrappier. They tend to be smaller, but a little flightier. And that does sometimes correlate with breeds of different animals. I think about that in rabbits. I think about that in dogs. I think about that in horses. So size is a consideration, perhaps. Then is fiber a consideration? So while we get wool from all sheep, We definitely are not going to get wool that we might want to use from yarn from all sheep. Jump in, Karen. We've got a question in the chat. So that is always a difficult question because twofold. So I can obviously only shear so much. And I do have to say right now, with regards to my wool, I generally don't incorporate the wool into my yarn. Reason being is right now we have the 3 Cotswolds. And while I love the Cotswolds, they are actually a rare breed of sheep. They are a bit of more of a rug wool breed. That is what they were known for. And that is why they started to die off in numbers, because as people started to use synthetic fibers for making rugs, then a breed like a Cotswold, which does not necessarily excel in meat. I mean, they, of course, you can get meat from them. They didn't excel in their fleece because it's a little bit coarser. Then they started to die off in popularity. And so that's where certain animals are more of what we call like a dual purpose. So their wool is a little bit coarser. We have used it in the past for weaving. We actually create a line of handbags, and we were definitely looking to do that again. I'm stealing them from you, Karen. And then also, another thing is I love their fleece as an art yarn, where you can basically enhance the softness by utilizing those curls. So that's a little bit right now, is you can usually find these guys in my roving. I generally will use my wool for the roving. And actually not that long ago, and Jennifer Andrus, if you are on, you scored yarn from Jack and Jill that I was kind of hoarding for a little bit, just because it's taken before I've been able to do that again. So I hope that's always a long-winded answer, because nothing is ever that simple. And I don't think people always realize what goes into what we do around here. So if I want to do a yarn from Lily, for instance, I need to gather more than several fleeces from her before I can do any kind of production, just because I have to do larger production to also try and keep my costs down. So that's like a little bit of business thrown in there with a little bit of the mechanics understanding that. And then it's also time. And that's something that we talked about the other day on one of our programs. Oh, no, it was at the open house. Somebody was asking, how come the yarn that is shorn by me is more expensive than our American raised and spun? And that's because when it's fleeces that I've directly shorn, I'm in the backyard having to sort them on a grate, going through, picking them, going through, getting out any vegetable matter, grading them, packaging it, and then getting it off to the mill. And that definitely takes a lot more time also. So that's just kind of the mechanics. I mean, one of the things that I always want you guys to understand and appreciate is how everything gets from the animal and to the yarn itself. And we've done a couple of farm to yarn programs in our virtual knitting programs. And so that is also something I just right now actually am thinking to Jennifer with your homeschool to think about, to mention to you. Many of our knitting venues have been going virtual. So instead of us seeing each other at the Pittsburgh Knit and Crochet Festival, we are now doing everything on Zoom. And I think what people don't realize is just even purchasing a marketplace ticket, you are going to be able to obtain a wealth of information. It's not all just about people selling yarn. There are people out there that are providing information. There's a lot of education. So we've got a venue coming up this weekend, and we've got another one next weekend that I just highly recommend if you guys have not participated. For $10 or under, you really are going to be able to learn so much. And of course, there's no obligation to buy. So I just think it's a great opportunity to be able to see what so many other people are doing, and you can really pick and choose. It's great because it's like going to school where you can get up and leave a class because maybe you're not interested in as much, and go see the next one. So I highly encourage you to take a look. Yeah, jump in.
So the Cotswolds are carpet wool. The Rombies, they're for spinning more, like they're finer.
Well, so I mean, everybody is for spinning. That's definitely something you want to clarify. It's just about the fineness. So fleece, so an individual fiber is measured in microns. So a micron count is that there's actually a way to take a single strand and get it under a microscope or measure it in terms of microns. And so the larger the number, the coarser, the lower the number, the finer. And so it's more about microns. There are many people that will use Cotswold for yarn because here's the thing. Everybody loves soft and squishy and yummy, but soft and squishy and yummy pills. So let's say you want to create some outerwear. These guys are excellent for gloves, mittens, vests, jackets, sweaters that you're going to wear on the outside. Admittedly, having a hat where it's going to be up against your skin might be coarser for some people. But again, it's also personal preference. Some people are more sensitive to that prickle factor than others. So the Romney, while they do still fall into the long wool breed category, and they're definitely not a fine wool, they're not as coarse as the Cotswolds. So you can very easily actually Google all these breeds, and there are charts out there where you can see a list of breeds and the range of the micron count, just to give you an idea of where they fall into play. And that'll have to be the next chapter for Tuesdays with Tabbethia, is providing you guys with downloadable handouts and homework. We'll kind of get into so many different things. So really the fleece aspect of it, again, is a whole another chapter. But just to give you a couple of breeds to think about in your fine wool breed category, you've got Merino and Rambouillet. You've also got Corriedale. Cormo is a cross between a Corriedale and a Merino. So these are breeds that fall into the fine wool category, and that means, generally speaking, a wool that you can have up against your skin and comfortable for most people. And then, as I mentioned, there's that medium wool category. So one that comes to mind there, only because I know somebody that breeds them here on the island, is a Finn sheep. So a Finn sheep falls into that category of a breed that has litters. They can sometimes have up to 4 and 5 lambs at birthing. And they are at the higher end of the medium grade fleece. Then, as I mentioned, you've got the long wool and then the down breeds. So one of the things that's also a sensitive subject, of course, depending on people's beliefs and what they eat, is that it is a reality that these animals are, of course, also a meat-bearing animal. So your down breeds are generally going to be breeds that are raised for meat. They still have wool, but it's very short and it is coarse. So actually that just goes to disprove what I said earlier as I was thinking about it. But breeds that fall into the meat category, you've got your Suffolk, just like the county we live in. You've got Hampshire. You have a Southdown. You have Oxfords. You have, there's a bunch of them. So those are just some breeds to mention. And as a farmer that is raising sheep specifically for meat, part of the downfall is that these animals still need to be shorn, but you're not really finding any value in that wool. So it ends up being an overhead in some way. Again, that's just a little bit of a business aspect, but again, it's things people don't think about. So if you are solely raising your animal for meat, now you've got to worry about still getting off this wool for the animal's health and well-being, of course. That can be a great wool to felt with. It's short, it's coarse, but that doesn't mean it's not applicable. You can create felt with it. You could create insoles with it. You could create your wool comforters with it. So everything still has an application. One of the things, go ahead. Did somebody have a question? I can hear.
Sebastian has a question. Yeah.
How old do sheep?
Go ahead, Mike. Go again.
How old do sheep get?
Oh, great question. So I alluded before when I said that Lily was 11 and she was a senior citizen. So what I usually say is that 8 to 10 years old is kind of senior citizen. 12 to 14 is probably about all you should expect. That perhaps doesn't mean that you couldn't have a sheep that could live to 15 or 16. But that hopefully will give you a little bit of an idea. And that also holds true for goats as well. And so animals, as they get older, have different requirements and different needs. And that's how we look at our animals here at Long Island Yarn and Farm. And so as our animals get older, Lily, for instance, has a difficult time with hay. When these animals, my gosh, I must be driving you guys crazy. I'm going in a million different directions because there's so many different things to be able to talk about. And again, as I always say, please make sure you give me feedback. Let me know topics that you want to focus more on. So the reason why that came to mind is these animals are what we call ruminants. And a ruminant animal is an animal that has a 4-chambered stomach. And what that means, of course, nobody's doing it right now because I keep feeding them to keep them occupied and keep them with us, but they will eat their breakfast, they will graze perhaps, they will eat for a period of time, chew, swallow, just like you would expect. Then when they're done, and most times when they're relaxed, they will go off, sit down, stand up, and they will ruminate. And what ruminating means is they can actually regurgitate small boluses, balls of food, and re-chew it to be able to better absorb all of their nutrients. So if you see that picture of like a cow and it looks like it's chewing gum, well, cows, goats, sheep, llamas, all of these animals are ruminants. So they all can do that bubblegum chewing, if you will, if you think about that. And so the reason why I brought that up is because Lily, as she's gotten older, has a little bit of issue with her ruminating and perhaps has a little bit of like a reflux. And so oftentimes her ruminating does not quite go the way it's supposed to go. And she often also gets bloated or gets a little bit of swelling in her belly. And so one of the things, it's great for sheep. If you think about it, it's a perfect antacid, is that you can use baking soda. And so you can feed that to them to help balance out their stomach and their system as like an antacid. And so we do feed that to her to try to help with that. But we've also found that by not feeding her hay and supplementing her diet in other ways does help with that. Lily's over by the camera because she's getting pets from Karen right now. And these guys are always great for that. So that's a little bit about like with these guys, and as animals get older. The other thing that people don't think about is as these animals get older, their teeth wear down. As their teeth wear down, they can't chew their hay and digest it properly. And I think that that's something that is easily misunderstood or forgotten about. And so for these two guys here, Jack and Jill, as they've gotten older, we've noticed that they've not been able to maintain their weight on the regular diet that, let's say, somebody like Mumford here can maintain, right, buddy? So we have these guys also on a little extra supplement to be able to help them to maintain their weight as they get older. One of the things that I always tell people, if you think about it, it might be a weird analogy, but as people get older, or like I say, if you go to like a nursing home, for instance, if you think about it, you don't really see overweight older people. Our bodies just don't metabolize things the same way, or they don't hold on to it as much. And so that's the same with animals. And we have to view these. Remember that felting we talked about? See, that's what they do all the time. So one of the things we have to think about is that if you're really going to care for your animals in a unique individual way, as we love to, then you have to think about how you can adjust and make amends for them as they change in all different ways. So I told you guys, as they continue to wear their fleece, it's itchy, especially on a warm, wintry day. This is December 1st, and it's sunny and it's beautiful. And so they will sweat under there. And so now you can think about all of that body temperature, all of that sweat and moisture underneath, and the fact that he's itching all of that. That's where felting comes from. So, hey, baby Clover. All right. Yeah, go ahead.
So books on sheep keeping, like the chapter on common ailments has a million things, and they make it sound like if you look away for 5 minutes, they will just drop dead. Like, how fragile are these animals actually? Like, how worried do I have to be that like they'll die of fly strike or worms or bloat or whatever?
Nope, that's a great question. I mean, look, I think with any animal, the care of, and not to say that I wasn't going to focus on that. I mean, I think that there's probably fewer people, maybe, who knows, that'll be in the sheep keeping based on where they live. But it's also breed specific. And I think that that's true in any animal area. So in doing your homework, you're always going to find that there are certain breeds that have things that they are more prone to. You're also going to find that there are certain breeds that may be hardier, depending. So that's one thing you always want to look at. And for instance, High Strike, and I think books are great, but definitely participating in programs like this, talking to other farmers in whatever animal you're looking at is going to help to give you the realistic things about that. Parasites are the biggest demon. And I, Chill's looking at me. I don't know that for today we'll be able to really get up on it if I can actually get somebody to stay still enough for it. And I will maybe see if I can get my hands on Jack. But with parasites, the biggest thing that you have to worry about is the parasites attacking them internally and creating anemia. And there are some very deadly parasites these days because there are resistance that's being created, and there's like super bugs, and we're not coming up with, nor they're not coming up with any new drugs to be able to treat it. So definitely something that is something to be careful of. And you can actually check the color of their eyelids to be able to identify where they are. Pale white, obviously, meaning they are lack of red blood cells, meaning they're very anemic, is basically emergency treatment. And then, of course, on a scale from 1 to 5, bright red, healthy, and nice pink coloring. So parasites, I think, is the biggest thing, really, and that's it. I think the biggest thing that, rather than getting into too much of it, it's always knowing what normal is so that you know what not normal is. And that's always important. And being able to body score your animal. So that means that being able to look at our animals, I'll get them back over here again. So, okay, great. Thank you. I was just getting a time check. Sorry, Miss Lil. So one of the things about body scoring is oftentimes when animals are in full fleece, people have a hard time being able to visually see whether or not they are fat or skinny. And oftentimes we'll mistake the wool for being the fatness under there. So that is just going to come with experience, but always, I'm going to get him over here, always just grabbing them on their top line and feeling a little bit about that. So I'm always feeling on their top line to see how bony it might be. And then I'm also palpating the ribs. I'm running my fingers along the ribs. Now, one of the things, Mumford, I hate to call you out on this here, and now he thinks I'm petting him. If your hand is flat on your animal's back, that means you're too fat, right, buddy? So I always say, if you can have dinner, if you can put a dinner plate on your animal's back, you know you need to be on a diet. He's just big bone. We tell him that. It's okay, buddy. So he is just naturally a bit more robust. But again, you can see that my hand is not at a 45-degree angle. It should be at a 45-degree angle. And I cannot palpate his ribs easily. I know they're there, but I just feel a little bit of extra skin and fat. All right. So those are some things that you want to take a look at. Now I'm going to actually grab Jack here. So I'm going to have Karen come in and we can look at Jack's eyes. Now my sheep, I know that they're not usually very, very bright pink, but you can see that pink color there as opposed to if it would be white. So you pull down that eyelid to be able to see the color in there. Thanks, buddy. So those are a couple of things with the health of the animals that is super important. One of the things from a fiber point of view, because look, I've mostly got a lot of my knitters on here and my fiber enthusiasts. So what you want to remember, like anything else, the health of the animal is going to absolutely be reflected in the health of the fleece. I mean, maybe it's something that you don't think about. But if your animal is healthy, just like the same with us, if anybody experiences an illness, a severe illness, in which you perhaps might have a little bit of where your hair itself is brittle or your nails are brittle, That's the same thing for these guys. So if an animal, any fiber animal, if they get sick at any point in time, then somewhere, wherever that wool was, he wants to get around the feeder, wherever that wool was, you're going to have what we call a stress break. And so when I shear the animal, one of the things that you always want to do as well is you want to look at the health of the fleece, and you're going to hold it at either end, or you're going to snap it next to your ear. And what I'm doing is I'm listening to it. Do I get a nice healthy snap to it? Is it nice and strong? Or as I do that, am I hearing it starting to break? Okay, so that's another thing as well. Also, supplementing your animals, making sure that they've got the proper vitamins and minerals is only going to add to the health and of their fleece and the coat. So that's something as well to be able to think about. Now, as we're kind of rounding out, one of the things that I definitely wanted to make sure that we talked about, and it's also a little bit of segue into tonight's program as well. But this time of year, I was just thinking about it last night because I've been so busy. And as the weather gets colder, I tend to get cracks on my heels. And I knew all that well, actually, over the course of these past couple of days, all of us have been getting paper cuts and things on our fingers because our fingers have been so dry and we've just been so busy, and everybody's been working endless hours to get ready for our event that was just this past weekend. And we all kept laughing because our hands were so dry, and we're like, we do have something that can fix that. It's kind of all over our house. So the lanolin, when you guys look at these sheep, not so much Miss Lily because she's a natural color, but when you look, hey, thank God you guys can't open tops. When you look at everybody else that is white, you are going to see a bit of a yellowish tinge. And so that yellow tinge is the lanolin. That's the natural grease, if you will, that is secreted through the fleece. Now, Jack is actually the best one. And while he's eating, I'm going to get Karen to get in on that. Look at that. So not only can you see the yellow, but you can also see, because he's wet, you can really see it glisten. So that lanolin is a natural byproduct that has nothing to do with needing to process the animal. So when I shear, that lanolin's all over me, and we're going to take that lanolin out when we are creating yarn. Most people are no longer spinning in the grease or making yarn in the grease, which is that lanolin factor. And my one little tip or trick or sort of tidbit of information, if you think about the old style fisherman sweaters, you've heard of a fisherman sweater. That sweater was done in the grease so that the men on the boats would be wearing a sweater that is coated in lanolin to help repel the water, help repel moisture. That lanolin is anhydrous. That means it repels moisture. Also, for people that use cloth diapers with their children, they will lanolinize it. That means they will coat that diaper in lanolin to help repel moisture. That's why we oftentimes are familiar with lanolin. Look, I found a new toy for the sheep. Just have like one of those, like a little King Kong ball for dogs. We'll just leave it out. It'll give them exercise all day long. So one of the things about that lanolin, that's why it is excellent. People know it as a nipple cream. Also, it is great for prevention for diaper rash. But for the rest of us, of course, it is just an excellent moisturizer. So for them, it makes them waterproof, and it prevents all the weather elements from getting down into their skin, helps to keep them warm and dry. And for us, it's going to help to protect our skin. Oh, Mumford, we have electric fencing. And he got carried away and his bum hit the fence. It's not very strong, I promise you, but it definitely startled him. Oh, I feel so bad. Come here, buddy. It's okay. All right. So,
Question.
yes, go ahead.
When you want to extract lanolin for use in bath and body products, how do they get it out of the wool?
So
Like, how do you purify it out?
Yeah, so it's and you can do it by hand, but it's much like the maple syrup process, you need a lot of fleece in order to even get any sort of volume. A long time ago, when one of my formulators was working with me, we extracted it. And I mean, she said she got like a tablespoon out of one fleece. So essentially, if you think about it, it's oil and water. And there are very few actual, what we call scouring places, scouring plants. I believe there's only one left in the US, down in the Carolinas. And so they are specifically set up to take the fleece and extract the lanolin. And so because it's your oil and grease, it's a separation process. So being able to, if you were ever to wash your own fleece, you can actually see the lanolin separating out. So by using temperature control and then being able to lift the lanolin out and then separating it from that area. So again, think about how you put oil into water and you just automatically get that separation. This does exactly the same thing. If you coat your hands with lanolin and then stick your hand under the sink, water, you will see it bead up on your hands, literally. Just the same as there's like a product you can put on your windshield, so you don't have to use your windshield wipers. So there's so many applications for lanolin, actually. It is even used in space aeronautics. It's used in keeping rust off of marine equipment and different things with boats. So it has a multitude of purposes, but that's how it is harvested. We do not harvest our own lanolin for our products. It's impossible. So we do purchase our lanolin, and we do buy it in bulk, and then we decant it. It is pharmaceutical grade. So that means it is safe for us to use, safe for animals, multitude of applications. Thinking about it, you can put it on your, Lily, don't get to the fence. You can put it on your dog's paws to help keep the snow from accumulating in their feet if they are a dog that's outside a lot. My husband is a farrier. You could actually coat the horseshoe to keep the snow from accumulating into the horse's hoof. That's why they actually oftentimes have to put what we call snowball pads on to cover the bottom of the foot so that that doesn't happen. So 1,000,001 applications. We are going to be running out of time. Of course, I'm going to make sure I leave a few moments for any additional questions. But I do want to remember a couple of things, of course, in terms of housekeeping things. First of all, again, I'm always looking for feedback with regards to programming. I'm definitely curious. So many people are interested in our felted soap demo that we did last week, that we are offering one again this evening to also try to accommodate people who can't make it for the 11 o'clock hour. I definitely have other DIY craft ideas in mind. Is that something that we're interested in, especially as we're getting towards the holidays, or even really as we're getting towards the winter months and needing to do more things indoors? So definitely let me know. We are going to continue to utilize as much time as we can outside doing things with the animals. So definitely look out for our newsletter or look for our Instagram stories to be able to see what's up next for our Tuesdays with Tabbethia. If anybody is interested, remember we do have the felted soap demo this evening, of course, which you can still jump on and join us. And as always, I definitely want to say, please continue to spread the word, because I love all the different backgrounds that everybody is coming to this program with. And as you see, just even with this introduction for sheep, we can take every aspect of what sheep are used for. I didn't even mention the fact that sheep are used for dairy. Did you know that? There are specific breeds of sheep that are a dairy breed of sheep. And your original true feta cheese is made from sheep's milk. So that's just a little another tidbit of information for you. So with the few minutes remaining that we have, and of course I never mind going over, although we have a lot of packaging to do. Does anybody have any questions? And I hope people have questions. So that's especially those of you that maybe I've not heard from, or even if I have heard from, I'm going to stop talking and I'll wait to see if there's any other questions that we can talk about. Nothing? I'm surprised. All right, well, I will definitely then use the time to recap, but if you guys think about anything, please don't hesitate to jump in. Again, yeah, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. I can always think of a question, but I wondered
I appreciate it.
Did you say that you were doing needle felting coming up as a program? You don't have to be
That-
pressured to, but I know that I was going to do it with the kids. Yeah.
No, that's, that is, I know we were talking about that, and that's why I said, that's why I was looking to get some feedback to see what people might be interested in.
Yeah.
I definitely would love to do that. My my only worry, which I can very quickly, is I used to keep felting needles and things like that in store, and we don't have that at that point in time. And what I've definitely seen was, after doing the felted soap demo, it was just a whim. We're like, let's put a kit together, and I can't tell you how many people are excited for the kit. So I do want to do that. And I guess that would be also something I would be looking for feedback is, do we want to have things, to be able to put together, as far as the materials that people would need? Because I don't want to be teaching people something and then you're like, where do I have to go? So
Right.
I'll throw it out to you, and then you guys can give me some feedback. But super easy things that I love doing is you can make a very easy Christmas ornament. I mean, that of course is perfect for this time of year. It doesn't have to be that. Actually, even I remember one year for Valentine's Day, we made really beautiful hearts, and we kind of just did this whole little thing with that. So that's something. The other thing, which I really love, and I really would have to get the kit together for this, is that a long time ago, somebody taught me how to make a flower with needle felting. And it's really pretty simple, but it's so cool. And that's really something that I'd love to share with people, because I think people would really like that a lot. And it's just using pipe cleaners and little styrofoam balls. And then, of course, you need the roving. But it's really, really cool. You just make the beautiful, like, petaled flower with little leaves and things like that. And I think that's a really great, fun craft that people can enjoy. So give me feedback, guys. Let me know what you're looking for. As always, there's plenty up here, and I'm just really excited to share it with everybody.
I have another question too. I'm
Yeah.
noticing, like, when you're interacting with the sheep, it seems like they all kind of have their own personalities. Do you notice them being kind of people, like you have some that are more outgoing and some that are a little bit, I mean, you said they're sheepish, but do you still have some that are a bit more, I don't know, gregarious?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And one of the things with our llamas, we always joke around about is, like, I have a voice for everybody in my head. And I think everybody who works here with me is like that as well, too. And so, yes, just even with amongst the animals here, even vocally, look, that's another thing too you have to take into consideration if you ever want to have sheep. My farm was silent until we added sheep. My llamas hardly make noise except for when the boys fight. Maybe they hum a little bit. My goats are super quiet. I find Angora goats to be very quiet, except for Copy. And she doesn't like when the sheep leave, and she yells a lot. And she doesn't like when she's, out of her pen, and she yells a lot. But when they're in their home, super quiet. Everybody else, yeah. So then we get sheep. Now, all the way up at my house, I can hear them yelling, but it's breed specific. My Cotswolds tend to be the noisy ones. And I've heard other people that have Cotswolds say that as well. I just, of course, I have to take a picture so you guys can see the behind the scenes, because if you could see this right now, Lily's over there hanging out with Karen, getting some pets. But my Cotswolds have big mouths, and my Romneys don't really make any noise. They don't really yell as much. So breed specific is definitely going to also navigate personality. The other thing for me is, because we are looking for sheep that are not sheepish, I don't say sheep are the smartest. Sorry, Montford, he just looked at me. But they definitely can learn their observance. So I just always say, I kind of joke around that they're not really high up on the intelligence chain, of course, like pigs. And I know, sorry, he looked at me. But because I feel like for shearing, people say all the time, do they like it, or do they understand it? And I'm like, well, if they understood it, I wouldn't have to run around after them, because they would know that they're going to get shorn and they're going to feel great afterwards. And they definitely have a flight instinct. So their instinct is really just in panic or danger to want to run, but they learn from each other. And that was my point in this. So I like to have variety of ages, and they all learn from each other, and they all see how we interact with them, and that it's not so bad. And so before there was Lily, there was Titi, and then it was Titi and Lily, and then Lily now as our matriarch has certainly taught the others. In this instance here with these two, Jack and Jill are twins. Jack was always the more personable one. They're both bottle babies. And even though Jill was the bottle baby, for the majority of her life, she has been very shy and we don't normally are able to pet her. It is now only as she's gotten older and probably calmed down a bit and maybe just doesn't want to run away from us, that she has learned that people give scratches and that it's kind of okay to be around us. She still will not come up to people for tours. Then we added on Mumford. Mumford is a big love. He doesn't like to be caught. When we have the halter, he sometimes gets real scared, like he thinks we're going to eat him. But then yet, on the other hand, once he's on the halter, even in terms of with the groups that come here, it takes him a little bit to warm up, as long as you don't move too fast. If you move too fast, then he gets scared. As big as he is, you know, he can sometimes be a little bit of a baby. And then we've got baby Clover. For her, it's just a matter of attention span. She's super friendly, but she is little. She's a kid. And so her attention span as she's been getting older is allowing her to interact more, right, with group tours and people that come around. So all animals have personalities, even our chickens. So if you just take the time to get to know them, be around them, that again, for me, is exactly why we do this. That is putting face with the fiber. That is so that as you are knitting, whether it's with our yarn or our wool or from these animals or not, that you just have a better perspective of the faces behind all of the byproducts and all of the beautiful fleeces that we get a chance to work with. That was a good conclusion. But are there any other questions before we do look to wrap up?
I think sometime, Tabitha, somebody would love that. I think that young man would love to see how you shear a sheep because it's so different than a llama.
It is, absolutely.
you
And thanks,
can't-
Robin.
You can't do it in that outfit.
Well, this isn't really a fancy outfit, but I pretty much, yeah, not so much like this. But, and yeah, I will say, I'm trying to think if I have anything on my grid. I know if you go to my Instagram grid, there's probably like a lapse time video. But yes, absolutely. I think, you know, Jennifer, you guys just kind of missed us by about a month, you know, as far as being able to see a shearing demonstration. Obviously, before I know it, my spring shearing season will be here again. So definitely, you know, keep an eye out for that. But I do find that people do find the sheep shearing to be a little more interesting than the llama shearing. I think that's just because they like to see me have to rump them, and it's a lot more physical, perhaps. Llama shearing can sometimes be a little more exciting if there's jumping and spitting and kicking going on, but the sheep shearing is a little more physical and a little more demanding on me. So I think it depends on, you know, what you're interested in, but absolutely. And yeah, thank you, Robin.
Tabitha, watching you flip a sheep is something that is a must-see.
Well, I'm glad I could be entertaining to everybody. Most of the time it's entertaining for me. But I will say, even out of my own sheep, every year, I'm like, oh God, it's time to shear Mumford.
That's what I was thinking.
Exactly. And thankfully, every time I shear him, I always say to myself, oh, he was better than I expected, because he's a big boy and he can misbehave if he wants to. And if he chooses to misbehave, that's a whole lot more workout for me, because he's easily a good 200 pounds. And that's 200 pounds that I've got to hang on to. And with that right there, think about it, guys. When I'm shearing, like Robin, as you're saying, you see me flip them and they have to be in a certain position. When an animal has a little more girth, Mumford, and they should, being in that position is harder for them. And so sometimes that's why they're struggling, because they're like, I just don't bend that way. And so that is also something that is just another part of the equation. At the same time, when you get older sheep, like Sebastian, you asked, as far as with older sheep, think about it. Everybody else, he won't understand, but as we get older, we do not all bend the way we used to. And that's the same for sheep. So when I share Miss Lily here, I do try to keep that in mind. Or when I share other people's sheep that are older, I try to keep that in mind. And I definitely take my time, and I might have a little bit of an alternative position for them so that they are not in the same positions as a younger sheep that's a lot more limber and able to. So that's just a little something that I try to do, because for me, this is about the relationship with the animal. It's not about production. It's not about getting it done faster. It's about making sure it gets done well for both the animals and for the fleece that we're looking to harvest. Right, girl? Yeah. All right. So I think with that, I'm going to have to say my goodbyes, although everybody who knows me knows I could do this for hours. So Miss Lily's always got some itchies. You guys can see I got her itchy spot. She's making good faces. All right. So with that, guys, we do have our felted soap demo this evening. If you're not already signed on and you want another hour of Tuesdays with Tabbethia, we do have a special presentation tonight at 6 p.m. to be able to get some more people involved in the fiber arts. And I had a good time with it. And I think everybody who was on it did. So I know some of you, I'll see you again this evening. As always, please, guys, give me feedback. Let me know what you want to see. Let me know what you liked. And I appreciate it. Spread the word and tell others to join us. I know I have a lot of fun with this, and I really welcome it. And I want to thank you. So going to say my goodbyes from the sheep pen.
Thank
Goodbye,
you.
everybody. You're
See you
welcome.
later.
Thank you so
Bye,
much.
Robin.
We loved it.
Great. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you
Okay.
for those of you that joined us. Have a great rest of the day, everybody.
You too.